don't expect you to remember all of it.
Thank you.
But again, it's a demo, for you representing MLU. So at any point, ask questions. If you need to see something again, let us know that too, so we can go right into it. And John, I will go ahead and make you the presenter.
All right.
Let's see. There you go. And you can take control.
I'm working here just a second. Here we go. You see Sage 100?
It's coming up.
There we go.
All right. Now, Megan, what's your role there? So I can kind of, if there's something that may be more specific to you, I'll make sure to highlight it for you.
So what my role is actually is that I come into the company and I work as a consultant to better the company as it grows. And so I set up the company, I produce a platform for it, and then I train and build the company, and then I disappear. So and so my role right now is to find a software, implement the software, set up the software, put in the accounting year to date, from the start to date actually, and then train all of the staff that's there, along with your implementation team. And then we will run for maybe 2 months, and then we will disappear. And MLU GMS will run on their own.
Okay.
And then, John, how that'll work too on the implementation project, we will train Megan and her team, and then they will train MLU's folks on how to use the software.
Okay. All right. Ready to dive in? All right. So I've already logged in with a username and password. What we're seeing is Sage 100. We call it the business desktop. So whether I'm going in to do inventory related things or sales order or accounting, everyone has the same desktop. Now, I want to start with security in Sage 100. So Library Master that I'm highlighting here right now, I like to refer to that. It's not the official name, but I call it the control module. So that's where if you have more than one company that you'll be establishing and tracking and running in Sage 100, this is where you would define any and all companies, even if it's a test, like a test environment company, you would define those here. Each company, if you do end up with more than one company, you can have different, preferences and settings and details specific to the company apart from, it's not like one size fits all. Each company can have specific details and specific preferences defined. Now in Sage 100, security is based on the role. So that means instead of having to go to each user that would access the system and define by user, this user has access to this and doesn't have access to these things, you can define a job or a role that someone would perform for the company. So those roles would be associated with security permissions. So you can kind of see here, maybe it's just accounting, maybe it's more specific to AP clerk versus AR clerk, inventory control, purchasing, sales, etc. You would define the appropriate role or job based on what someone would be doing at MLU. And then let me kind of show you under that role, you can say, you have different things here as far as task, essentially what modules, what menus, what tasks. So for example, I'll expand this out a little bit. So AP maintenance, so maintenance and data entry. So this is where I would give someone access to do AP invoice data entry, check maintenance, that type of thing. Now, key thing here I want to hone in on is, like, for example, like vendor maintenance. Typically, if I give someone access to vendor maintenance, that user can create new vendors. They can modify or maintain an existing one. There's a delete button, but there's some rules associated with deleting a vendor that, no open invoices, POs, etc. Now, what's nice here is if you need to, you can have more granularity under that. So you'll notice here that for maintenance, now typically, all those different things can be enabled for the user if I say maintenance. but maybe vendors need to go through an approval process. So only certain users have the rights to create a new vendor. I could create a role where only they have that create option checked versus your regular AP clerk may have modify and view, but not, again, create or delete. So you can get granularity under the task and determine what types of activities a user can do within that task. Questions?
No.
Okay. Security events are more, do you allow access to certain things, type of things, and then module options. You'll learn this is Sage 100 can work multiple ways for multiple types of companies. So typically I need to go into each module and, turn on or off features and functionality. So this, gives that user, sysadmin, you probably want to have access to module options. Your typical AP clerk is not going to be able to go into module options and change how AP behaves. Typically, not to say it couldn't happen, but typically. So any questions on roles?
No.
Okay. Now, once the roles are defined, the users are defined under user maintenance. Pretty straightforward here. A logon, their name, a password's associated with. You'll create a user code for that, and then I can say, I am sysadmin across every company installed or every company defined in Sage 100, or in this company I have this role, in this company I have this role. So it can be granular by company, or you just have the same role across all companies. I'll point out too this user code will be stamped on or will follow that user. I go in and create a new customer. It will show that I was the one who created it. If I modify it, I modified it. Creating orders, invoices, transactions, etc. The user code is going to be associated with the activity that the user performs while they're in the system. Any questions there?
No.
All right. Now, aside from that, kind of the structure of Sage 100. Now, I want to point out over here kind of the modules. See how AR, GL, AP. You would only see the modules that have been installed, that you purchase and have been installed in the system. I didn't mention this earlier, but role maintenance, the security profile, will also filter out what a user sees. So security will actually filter what a user sees. They will only see the modules, the menus, and the task that they actually have permission to do. So learning curve-wise, you don't have to train a user, don't go here, don't go here. If they don't have permission, they won't see it. So it's kind of nice thing. Now, the structure of the modules, I'll go into AR as an example. So you'll see here is what we call the module menus. The same structure is kind of throughout, so you'll see this main reports period and set up throughout the system. Now, main is always going to have specific types of tasks: maintenance, data entry, and inquiry. Now, some modules like sales order, purchase order will have an additional inquiry menus. So if you see inquiries, that's where inquiries will be found. If you don't see inquiries, inquiries are going to be bundled under the main. But maintenance, inquiry, data entry, always under main unless an inquiries menu exists. Maintenance is always, what we talked about earlier: create a new one, modify existing one, delete. Inquiry is view only. So a user that just needs to see but wouldn't have any reason in the world to make a change to a record, keep in mind you could just grant them access to inquiry and all they could ever do was view. No maintenance capabilities at all. Now, so this common structure does allow a user who does more than one thing. They won't have to guess. If I have data entry, I go to the main folder of whatever module I need to do that data entry in. Inquiries, maintenance, or take tasks. It's not going to be hard to figure out. It's always going to be under main. Now, to avoid having to you don't always have to navigate that menu structure. As a user gets familiar with the task that they use on a regular basis, they have the ability to flag that option as a favorite. So let's say that I am running the finance charge calculations. I run it daily, and I run it frequently enough that I would just like to make it a little easier to get to. All I have to do is right-click, and with that right-click, notice Add to Favorites is an option. Now, before I make the selection, notice my focus over here is still on modules. As soon as I say Add to Favorites, it opens up my favorites menu and drops that item onto the bottom. Now, if I wanted to, if I have a nickname for that, I can right-click and rename it. It would only rename it on my favorites menu. It would rename it on the standard menu or for anyone else just on my favorites menu. And you'll notice that I have created some groupings. customer things at the top, followed by vendors, followed by GL. So I can take that, since this is AR, and I'm going to just drop it up here and put it where it makes more sense to go up in that customer section. So that grouping was created with these lines. I just insert a separator, or I can insert a folder and drop things into the folder. So not only can I say what I want on my favorites menu, I can create an organization to make my favorites menu even more clear by grouping, by whatever function, AR, customers, vendors, items, etc. Questions there?
No.
Now, since it's already open, if I wanted to add one more thing, so let's say this little report also, I can just go ahead and drag this and drop it into that reports folder. I don't have to say add to favorites since it's already open. Now I'm going to go back to modules. Now any maintenance as far as renaming, inserting a separator, inserting a folder, moving things around, I would always go down and open favorites at the bottom. If I have my favorites set up the way I like, you'll notice at the top there's a favorites tab. That will display my, basically it'll dock my favorites at the top. So those things that I use all the time are just sitting at the top waiting for the next time I need it. No need to navigate from between modules and menus. It's just up there waiting for the next time I need it. If I have dropped it into a folder, it's just a matter of clicking and then selecting the item from that drop down. And again, unique to the user. Other questions?
No.
Right. Another tool that we have for getting around the system, I'm going to go here. It's visual process flows. So in this case, what you'll see is instead of being specifically based on a module, it's more kind of a function. Sales, customer billing, inventory purchases, vendor payments, period end closing. So under these, there's different options. So sales order, entry and invoice, packing and shipping, returning of goods, customer billing. This is accounts receivable, invoice and receipt payment. I'm not going to go through every one, but you'll see purchase order entry and receipt, vendor payments, accounts payable, invoice and process payment. So I'm going to drill in and open this. So in this case, instead of this folder-driven type menu navigation, when I choose a visual process flow, I'm going to get a visual or a map menu type. So this lays the process out in the order that those processes normally occur. So the user has a reference for starting point, step 1, etc., step 2, step 3, so they can tell where they start, what step 2 is, how many steps they have left to go, and it provides related inquiries, related reports, and it's not just a help screen. The text and the buttons have been linked to the task. So if I need to enter an AP invoice, clicking that button will actually open up accounts payable invoice data entry. So I have quick and easy access. So these can be favorited too, so I could launch these from favorites as well. So instead of having multiple links for individual tasks, this opens up an interface that gives me the entire task from start to finish. And they can be modified. So if I go back to visual process flows, we give you kind of the basic process. Again, this is accounts payable, sales order, entry and invoice, every step from entering the order, packing and shipping, invoicing, returning of goods, inquiries, accounts payable, we were on accounts payable, purchase order, entry and receipts. So again, maybe, for example, in the case of, let me go to accounts receivable invoice data entry, out of the box, this is strictly AR. In a distribution company where you sell something to a customer, you may issue a sales order, then you need to invoice the sales order. I may want to add something so that, so they do AR invoicing for services a lot. I may want to add a button to create a link to launch sales order invoice data entry. Maybe I want sales order inquiry added here so I can look that up as well. So if I need to add functionality or remove a button that is not useful to a user, I can go through a process here, Visual Process Flows Manager, something that you can learn very easily. So I'm just going to say create a new process flow, and then it takes you through a wizard. Now I'm going to give it a name and just a description. And then I can say associate this with a specific menu. I'm going to just say associate it with accounts receivable. I'm going to say next. I'm going to take the closest one to my end product, what it should be, so I can edit, but I want to do the least amount of edits as possible. I'm going to start with AR and invoice receipt payment. Which security profiles will have access to this? and then just a verification screen. So what it will do now is open the template that I selected with some tools. So you can get as fancy as you want to. So I could import backgrounds and company logos and incorporate imported items. There are different little, backgrounds that I can utilize if I choose to. They can be distracting. I like the plain one versus these here. But one of the things I typically do like to do is like these themes. Let me kind of scroll down here. Like the subway map. If you don't like, kind of the default, kind of ugly greens and stuff, this has some more, different blues or different icon sets so you can choose from. So let's say I wanted to add a new button, and because let's say I want to do sales order invoice data entry, I want the blue button to differentiate from AR. So I have my new button. It's just that quick. I just drop it on there. I could also copy and paste, just take one of those existing buttons and move it if I wanted to. I'm just going to go ahead and clean that one up and stick with the blue. Now that new button's there, the process of telling that button what to do is very simple. I just highlight the button. I use this link button, and then I can click this ellipse and tell it essentially what module, what menu, what task. I'm going to say sales order, and then name, and then invoice data entry. So I'm going to provide my accounts receivable clerk the ability to create a straight, accounts receivable invoice, as well as invoice a sales order if they should need to, without having to move to a different visual process flow or screen. So I'll just say, okay, that button's added, and then I can do the same thing for the text. So just kind of just grab this and move it around, and then I could just call that. And I can make it bold. For time, I'm not going to bold that. And then, of course, I'll just say link and tell it what I want the text to do if I click the text instead of the button. So pretty straightforward. Again, copy, paste, link. That's really all you need to do, is to be able to program these to do additional tasks. You can also embed links. So if there's a web page, they need to go look at a vendor or customer website or freight forwarder website or something of that nature, I could always create a button to launch a web page from within the visual process. So any questions on this functionality?
No, that's awesome.
So the nice thing about this is, in general, typically people are like, well, how much is that going to cost? But just takes a little bit of time. You'll learn how to use the tool. So it's not complicated. Again, it gets more fancy. Like if you want, logos and stuff, you got to learn the directory and where to put it in and the file types. But in general, adding a button and telling it, hey, I want this, to do this is quite easy to do. Let's say in the case of deleting a button, it's just delete it, and then I can take that little segment and just scoot it back so I don't have that extending. And then I can delete the text. So, quite easy to do. And then I'll just go ahead and save process flow. And then when I create a custom one, so here's that custom one, which should launch sales order invoice data entry if I did that right. There we go. Now I have AR and SO. There's no rule that has to, that says it has to be from the same module. I can combine module links on one visual process flow. Now, when I created it, I said, remember, it asked me what module. So because I said what module, any custom, it will be under here. So here's that, I can always launch that there, or I can make it a favorite, and then it'll pop up over here on my favorites menu the next time I go off and come back. Instead of refresh, once I leave my favorites and come back, that'll be there on my favorites menu. So any questions there?
No, that's okay.
Great training tool, because it kind of lays out the process. You don't have to tell them, well, you need to go to AR main, and then you got to go to report. It's kind of all in a single screen, and you can build it to have everything that they need if they need other things. Again, no rule that says it has to be from one module. Now, there's some things that come automatically out of the box. Oh, let me do one more thing here. View. This allows, instead of having to be an admin, so for example, scaling here, notice my resolution right now, the largest application scaling I can support is medium, but I'm going to show you, notice the font size here on the menus. If I take this back to default, how small that got, and I'll just click on customer maintenance here and notice when I open that, how small the screen looks. So essentially, this gives the user ability to say, like me, my reading glasses are sitting downstairs on my desk. I was kind of in a hurry to get up there. So I'm going to need to take this to medium. Not a great deal of change there, but notice this got a lot bigger. The data entry screens, the inquiries would get a lot bigger. And again, depending on the resolution, I have large and extra large, so I could get even bigger fonts and bigger screens and bigger menus if I had a bigger device to display it on. So again, what's nice here is each individual user can pick that without having to go get the admin to come and adjust it for them. Other things I can do here, now I'm used to this sorting. It's not alphabetical. It's just kind of, I call it the traditional sort. It's always been in this order. A new user will probably find it easier to find what they're looking for if that was alphabetized. So here we go. Now it's alphabetized.
Nice. Yeah.
The menus, alphabetized. The task underneath those menus, alphabetized. So again, that's just, you can have all or none or some. And again, I'm so used to everything being where I say they're supposed to be. So I'm going to turn that off. Other things I can do here, different color combinations, maybe just easier for a user to enter, this color combination just may be easier to stare at for a longer amount of time, eye strain or just the contrast between specific colors. This is kind of predefined themes that a user can kind of, what I find is just easier for me to stare at this and work with this all day long. Maybe they're bored and want to change things up. So it's just, again, no admin needed. Each user can just apply those changes to, based on their preference here. Let's see here. So some other things that come automatically out of the box. Paperless Office is a tool that comes bundled with the system. It basically does several things. One of the key things it will do is anything that I can print from a Sage 100 workstation to a printer, I could avoid printing to paper and create a PDF and save it electronically. Now, likewise, where I can save those documents internally, so you'll have a copy inside the office to retrieve, you can also use Paperless Office to define delivery instructions for customers based on specific documents. So maybe at a small customer, every document's routed to the same customer. You may be dealing with customers with larger, with more people, with more varying responsibilities, where a sales order confirmation goes to a specific person, but the invoice and the statements for their account goes to one or more different people. So Paperless Office works kind of to define delivery instructions and to actually create and deliver that document based on the delivery preference of the customer, as well as storing copies of documents. So what I want to do first is kind of the front end, the customer record. So let me come in and show you what's nice about this is it's customer by customer and document by document. So I'm going to pull up a customer record here and paperless. Now from paperless, now I have all the customer documents, AR invoice, AR statement, RMAs, invoices, sales orders. So sales order confirmations, this customer only wants an email. The email tab, I can define that distribution. If I type an email address into the sales order, copy that. Copy Artie, who's the primary contact. Copy John, who's a secondary contact. And down here, if you want to send yourself an email so anytime you send them, you get the same email so you can verify what attachment the customer gets. You can put your, internally other email addresses outside the contacts associated with the customer can be defined here. So again, for each type of document, maybe it's always Artie and John. Maybe on some it's just Artie. Maybe Artie and John are not included on some and somebody completely different. So customer by customer, document by document. Now, paperless is also enabled for vendors. And that allows hard copy, email, or fax for purchase orders, return orders, or check remittance advice for ACH payments going to that vendor. Any questions?
No, I think I got that.
So let me show you. I want to show you on, let's say, the generation. So this would apply to sales orders. When I go to do the print job itself, I'm going to use statement printing as an example. Now, what the critical thing here is right now, if I hit print, I would just get hard copies. but I can change and save this to be print, PDF, or electronic delivery. So let's say there's 25 customers in the statement batch. When I hit print, it's going to check the preference for each customer for every, for all 25 customers. Where hard copies are required, it will generate the hard copy. Where emails are required, it will generate generate an email and attach the PDF of the statement. And if someone still wants the fax, it will generate the fax. Now that PDF option is creating a copy of the document and saving it for you to have access to. So I'll show you now. If I hit print, I may get some errors here because I don't have a printer, and I think this is related to OneNote, but it will kind of give me a status that, hey, we attempted two emails and how many were successful. And then you can control, I'll say, the wrapper message for each type of document. So in Paperless Office, dear customer, please sign your enclosed order or statement or invoice, that kind of thing, that the email that the document would be attached to. So here's, we're saying, hey, how many emails were attempted and successful. So I don't have to print and scan an email. If an email is needed, it will automatically generate the email attached with that attached PDF. Now, it's not going to use, let's say, the AR Clerk's Outlook account. Back in Library Master under company maintenance, you will define essentially an email server by company. So the emails, I'm using this email server and this email account to send those documents out to customers. So it's not going to be that individual, AR Clerk's email account that's being utilized. Questions?
No.
Okay. Other things for paperless. Now I kind of showed you the delivery. Under paperless itself, these viewers, these are where documents can be stored. So for each type of document, you can come in and say for journals and registers, those are the accounting transactions. So the printouts or records of the accounting transactions can be generated and saved electronically in PDF. So this, typically you would create a shared folder on the network and you would point that. So essentially here's where my journals and registers, I'm putting all companies and all modules in a single directory. I can have it auto-create PDFs. I can password protect that. So essentially, as I create and post transactions, accounting transactions, the related documentation for those transactions is being generated as a PDF and saved electronically. So should I have an audit and need to retrieve the documentation for that, I can come in, you see some AP transaction registers. I have the ability, I can do electronic search. I just have 3, so it's very easy. So let me just enter my password here. But I can retrieve that. So here's my, the accounting details for that accounting transaction coming from accounts payable. Now, again, if I need it, if there were lots and lots of modules, search, what, I'm looking for a bank reconciliation register or a sales register. I can pick the module, the journal type, and, the user, the date, all kinds of details to electronically find that. Probably a lot easier than trying to dig it out of a filing cabinet.
Right.
Now, in addition to journals and registers, the reports associated with period and closes, all the associated reports can be generated and saved electronically to PDF. Reports, now this would be the user, or the user can basically say, this is a report that I would like to have an archived copy of. So that can be, AP analysis, aged invoice reports, inventory trial balance, or valuation reports as of date. So as of a certain date, our inventory value was X. You can archive those reports to have archived copies. So again, that's kind of, you just want to create a copy of a report and save it electronically. Now, again, you get here to customer view, or the documents that I'm generating and sending, that PDF option, it's creating a library of the customer documents. So invoices, statements, orders. So I'll just stick with invoices here. If the customer says, hey, I need a copy of, you can come in, again, use electronic search to find the one you're looking for. When you find it, I can review that, just, take a quick look at it. And then let's say with a click of a button, it will retrieve the distribution settings for that document and that customer, pull in the email addresses. Now, since it's a copy, Artie may say, hey, John doesn't need a copy, so I can go ahead and override and delete the additional recipients, or I can leave it as is. But I don't have to go look up who should I send this to. It will automatically pull in the distribution that has been assigned based on the customer and the document, and you can override it if you need to. Questions?
No. Well, I do. Do you have to so to do that, you have to have it set up for one just specific email? Like for QuickBooks, I'm more generated towards QuickBooks, so you have to forgive me. You have to have an Intuit user set up before you can start emailing it from the software. So is that what you have to do to get an email set up for email options here?
So in this case, now you have your email account, like an Outlook account with an email, like an SMTP server. So let me ask, do they have Outlook or do they use Outlook? What's their email? Is it Office 365, Outlook 365? Do they use Gmail, Outlook?
I don't know what kind of process they have, actually.
So it's not, I don't have to be, I have to be a user to be able to come in and say what email account to use.
Okay.
But I don't have to have a user for that email service. I don't know how QuickBooks works on the email, but I have to have an existing email account. And again, under company maintenance, what I do is specify, here's where I come in and say, so I'm in ABC now. So the email that the customer has received is going, I have my user ID, essentially my email address.
Mm-hmm.
And this is not a Sage 100 ID. This is my email account ID, if you will. And this is my SMT service. So this is, I can use this email address this is my corporate email address, essentially, or corporate email account. It's going to use this. Now, that's the email. So it's not the individual user, like the AP clerks or AR clerks Outlook account that's used to send the email. It's that email account. Now, the wrapper, I mentioned I can kind of change the wording. So again, paperless office. Down here, electronic, this is where I can say, dear customer, for, each document type. So the customer, I'll just say all companies. So for sales order, like the sales order confirmation, and this is where I can say, dear customer, please find your attached order confirmation, and then whatever text you want in the body of that. But this is, this email with this wording, it's going to mail merge the customer's details into this, but it's going to have the attached PDF for their, their particular order.
Got it. Okay.
Okay. Now, another great thing about Sage 100, now particularly based on the nature of what's sold by MLU, I'm guessing that I did see that lot numbers are required, because I would imagine a lot of medical equipment, has a lot number expiration dates, and maybe even other attributes that you may need to track. Let me kind of show you. We have a tool. Sage 100 comes with a tool called Custom Office. Now, in general, as a consultant, you probably know that when someone says custom in software, typically has negative connotation because it usually comes with a big bill. Custom Office is a tool built into Sage 100 that allows a user to create I can do a number of things. So you see some tools here. The most common thing is user-defined fields and table maintenance. So here's my explanation. So we do our best to provide what most people would need generically for a customer record, a vendor record, item record. But inevitably, based on a specific business or industry, there are required fields or records or specs that need to be associated with what's being sold, or certification or details related to a vendor or customer that you need to have associated with, the vendor is certified to sell a certain type of goods. They have a license to do that. It's certified, quality. Or there are fields that need to be associated with the item record. So if I need to create a field from scratch, I'm able to go to user-defined field and table maintenance every table, every field from the system is available. So APAR. So if I expand this, these are all the tables associated with accounts payable. Again, most commonly, I see more custom fields associated with inventory items because that really gets into a business or industry. What is being sold is different by industry, and there are specific attributes that need to be associated with those items that we just didn't know you needed. Doesn't mean you can't have it or you have to depend on a spreadsheet in addition to a field in Sage 100. So CI Item Master is the table associated with item records in Sage 100. If I right click and say Edit Fields, I think immediately what you'll see is I'm not limited to one or two. In this instance, in this demo instance, I have 27 custom fields associated with item records. I was in another demo earlier today that had 45 custom fields already associated with item records. So, and I'm nowhere near the limit. So I can have lots of custom fields, and you'll notice different types. So if I need a text field so I can type a value to associate with an item record, a drop-down box where I'm providing a list of values to select from, or a checkbox to confirm, hey, it meets the standard, etc. So if I wanted to create a new field, again, this is something you can learn how to do. I say add. I'll give it a name. I'll just say MLU spec. And now I can say, what type of field do I need? Do I need a text box, a drop-down box where I'm providing them a list to pick from? Do I need a date field? I can say date down here, and it'll provide a calendar to pick a date from a calendar to apply to that item record. I'm going to say drop-down box. Why I like drop-down box is, in this case, if they need to pick a value, this is me providing a listing of values for them to pick from. So we're not depending on them to type something and hope they type a valid value. Hope that you spell that value the same way as someone else spells that value.
Exactly.
So now maybe this won't need to be applied to every item. So maybe I make my first selection blank or NA. So I can say this value, it's not applicable to this item. So I can say it's not applicable. And then from there, I can say, I'll just make it simple and just say, this is the list that the user will see and be able to pick from and apply to the item record. Oops, again, I want to spell correctly. So when I say OK, now the key thing here is what I'm going to do now is say OK. And what you're going to see now is that new field that I just defined is being added to the tables and the database. So it's going to be available to be added to the screen, to lookups, to reports. It's becoming a part of the database. And because I didn't use custom programming to define that field, Sage 100 knows how it was created. So when it comes to upgrading Sage from one version to the next, that custom field and the custom screen will become a custom screen when I add it. When I add that record value to the screen, it will know how to upgrade it. So that will automatically be upgraded. I don't have to recreate it after upgrading from one version to the next. Questions?
No.
And let me show you an example of that. So I'm going to go to inventory. Now, there's different things that there are some restrictions. For example, I can't get rid of a standard field to replace it with a custom field. So kind of standard out-of-the-box fields are going to be there, and you can't delete them, remove them. So you'll note it like demo 1, 2, 3, 4 here, and John, those are examples of user-defined fields, and again, the drop-down box model, where I had, I'll say, screen real estate available, where I could squeeze 2 fields into the existing screen. There was some space available, and I used it. I put it under the unit of measure field. If there's a lot of information that you need to associate with the item record, tab number 8 and tab number 9 aren't standard. I added a tab, so I can even add a tab. So on tab number 8, what you see is an example of a custom tab where every field on this screen is one of those custom fields that I create. Product spec 1, 2, and 3, just text fields, check boxes, drop-down boxes. And let's say that I want to add the field I just created. Here's all I have to do. As long as I have permissions to access the tool, I will right-click, panel settings, customizer, and what you're going to see is the screen. Now, I can even say which company or users would have access to this. And then here's the screen definition for that custom tab. I just come over here, click this button, draw out where I want that new field to be, and just make sure it's at least one row. And I think that's probably too long. I'm just going to leave it as is. Now I'll get a list of all the custom fields that have been set up in the system, so I can pick the one I want that to be. I can preview to make sure that that's what I want it to look like. That's fine. Go ahead and hit save. So now going forward, when I open up an item and go to that tab number 8, I will have the ability to specify the MLU spec for this item record. Any questions?
No.
So no custom programming. And again, you can see what, 3 minutes, no more than 5 minutes to define the field and add it to the screen.
Mm-hmm.
You got to learn how to use the tool, but you don't have to learn how to program.
Right. That's right.
So what I like to say about that, again, we do our best, customers, items, vendors, we do our best to provide what most people would need, but there's always going to be something specific to your business or industry that you need. And that tool, instead of having to use as much as you can and then start using spreadsheets, well, you can add that to the tables and be able to add it to the screen and be able to see it directly in the system without going to refer to a spreadsheet to cross-reference what that value would be.
Right. That's perfect.
And again, not just keep in mind, I can do it on orders, purchase orders, sales orders at the header level, the line level, vendors, customers, GL accounts. So that's something that is enabled throughout. Now, there's some I can create custom tables as well. So if you need a custom table, that can be used to create and define a custom table. And it can also initiate scripting. So it's Visual Basic scripting. So that would require a programming knowledge of Visual Basic. So essentially what you can do there is do mini programs. So I've seen people do things like calculate, I'm trying to think here, it was like a recycling company. Like if something was recyclable, they had a flag that said that was a recyclable item. And then there was like an environmental surcharge that needed to be calculated. So they would, verify all the line items that had that recyclable, checkbox, that said it was recyclable. And then they would take all the values, because there were different rates for the different items. It would do a calculation to summarize to get the total of all the environmental surcharges and add it to the invoice record. So you can do little mini programs through Visual Basic scripting if you need to.
Nice.
And it could be a calculation or even like a pop-up box. So maybe a user has entered a value and you want to make sure that the user is informed of something. Like if there's something that's kind of out of the ordinary, it can recognize, based on a combination of attributes on a single sales order, that a pop-up box could be initiated to say, are you sure? It can initiate please check this, because that's not a valid combination of items or something like that, of that nature. Now, I'll point out, let me just double check here. Let me go into a specific item. I think I have some examples that may be it's more based on like vitamins and supplements, but it does have more details. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to pick a lot tracked item, and under the lot tracked item, under cost detail tab, it's not in this one, it may be in another company. So here's where this particular item is a lot number. So I can have an expiration associated with the lot number. Something I've done in the past, I did a demo for a surgical instrument company, like scalpels and things. They were serialized, but they also needed not only like an expiration date, they needed to see if that item was sterilized and then what the country of origin was. So if you need more than the expiration date, if you need to know the origin, the country of origin of that product, I could create a user-defined field to associate with a lot number. So the lot number would not only display the expiration date, but the country of origin, other, sterilized, the sterilization expiration date, or any other attribute that I may need to track for a lot number. I can define that if you need, like country of origin, I would imagine might be something been in the news quite a bit where things are coming from. If that is
Right.
critical and you need to know that, that could be added and tracked as well.
Yeah, it would be. Okay.
Okay. So let me see here. So again, all bundled. Now there's another tool. I'm not going to get really in detail on that. Visual Integrator comes automatically with the system as well. It's an import-export tool. It's going to be heavily utilized in the beginning, in the implementation process. So wherever the existing, set of customers, vendors, the chart of accounts, open orders, inventory items, that can be exported from your current system, and you'll be provided templates. The templates basically would allow you to move, let's say, item records into a template, and basically the template's formatted in columns, so we know where the item number is and can map that to Sage 100, the description, the product line, classification, any type of those details. So this would import, so you don't have to rekey all that information. We're going to import most of that stuff in the implementation process, chart of accounts, inventory items, vendors, customers, open orders. But it's not something that's just needed or can be used in the implementation process. If they are outsourcing payroll, and when you get the files from the payroll service company saying, hey, payroll was processed, here's your files, I can create an import to create the GL transactions for that payroll run. If a vendor sends you a big file of inventory cost, the pricing updates for what you're going to pay for products, instead of having to go and manually adjust those costs, I could build an import file and import the cost changes to the item records. So it's just a mapping process. So you would give the job a name. So essentially, if I can type it or manually enter it, I can import it. So invoices, pricing updates, GL transactions. So I'll just use AR invoices as an example. So when you define the job, you'll define, the source type. So I can import from, I'm locked in, I've already defined this, but it's linked to an Excel table. I can do CSV, tab delimited, comma delimited. If you have an application that's ODBC compliant, I can connect directly to the database. I don't need an external file. And then on the data tab, this is kind of the critical part. This is where you point Sage 100 or map Sage 100 to a data file element. You will find the customer number in this column for this length, and then you'll find the item number that they're ordering in this column for this length, and this is the quantity, and this is the price. So it's just telling Sage 100 where to find specific data elements within the source file. This file, once defined, once you map the file, the job can be ran over and over and over again. You even have the ability to schedule jobs, import jobs to run automatically, daily, weekly, monthly. So you can schedule those jobs to run automatically. And trying to think, the only time you would need to reconfigure the job is if the source file changed. So if there was an update to the external system and they started providing a new file in a new format, then you would have to create a new import job with new mapping. But as long as the data is always in the same place, you can use the job over and over and over again.
Okay.
Questions?
No.
All right. So again, those all come automatically. Now let me ask you this. Is there any specific area that you want to look at, AP, GL, AR, inventory, any specific area that you are more concerned with taking a look at?
No, accounts payable, I guess we can run through, but.
So let me just touch base. I'm going to touch base on GL here real quick.
Yeah.
Now, do you know on the chart, is the chart of accounts in use now? Is that set in stone? Is there room for improvement?
No, it's not set in stone. Everything can use improvement all the time.
Okay. So let me kind of show you. What I'm about to show you is how my current company is configured. It's not necessarily how they would have to configure the GL for them. My company that we're in, my demo company we're in now, the GL account structure is defined as follows. I have my main or natural account, and then 2 additional segments. The second segment representing a department, and the third segment representing a location. So again, second segment, it doesn't have to be department location. You can determine, if you needed 3 segments, you can determine what segment number 2 represented, what segment 3 represented. So that is entirely up to you, and how many you want. So again, we have lots of customers that just have 1 segment. Some have 2, 3, as you see here. It can support up to 32 characters with up to 10 segments. So it can have a very complex structure if it's needed. I've heard no one say, "Oh, I can't wait to do that." No one wants 32 segments with 10 segments. It can do it. I've heard no one want to, say, "I'm going to do that right away" when I describe that. So,
Right.
so keep in mind it's very flexible. It can be, it can be geared. So what's nice is, again, you define your main account. Under main accounts, you would define, each main account, the group, the category, the type. When you define that account segment for main, the sub accounts, very similar. You define, the segment, department, the sub account, and then you can associate that with the specific, in this case, department, and all those other details. So let's say if you add segments or create new accounts, you don't have to always, there's utilities. So I can have the system, like I say, if I add new account segments and new segments, I don't have to go create every variation. There is a tool that would allow me to generate. So this would basically, I could use this to generate any of the accounts based on, a new segment value or location being added to the system. You don't have to go manually create every variation of the GL account. So any questions there?
Cool. No.
Let me just show you real quick too. I'll just go to account maintenance. I'm going to pull up, if you know the account, you can always type it in. Let's say, for example, 115, my inventory account. So I know it starts with 115. After that, I'm not quite sure. I can either hit the magnifying glass little lookup over there, or just F2. That's what it begins with filter. It's going to show me all the accounts that start with 115. Now, I can always, let's say, if I go in, I could do the same thing. I say account begins with 115, or maybe I know description contains, and I could put, what I know into from the description into this field. Begins with, ends with, contains. A nice thing we have is this option here. This lookup is available. Now you'll notice that it took out begins with, contains, and it just allows me. In this case, I'm just going to say West. I don't have to know that that's part of the description. In this case, it's going to look for every record and show me every record that contains West. Now, it looks in every column. That's the only logical place based on this lookup where I would see that value. But it's going to look through every column associated with lookup and show me every occurrence of West. I don't have to know necessarily that that's a description. That maybe come into play more for an item record where you have item description and other fields that may more than a GL account. Now, another thing I can do here, let's say I know the description. I can actually start to type the description into the account number field. I get the description and then the account number. So if I pull in travel and entertainment here, I get my account number, description. On the main tab, the group, the category, the type, status, start and end date, cash flow type, if applicable. I can utilize roll-up codes. History is going to show me beginning balance, debits and credits, ending balance by period and fiscal year. I can choose any year in history, and I can enable this toggle button, which just gives me the net change. I can turn that on and off. Variance. If I need to associate a budget with an account, I can define the budget within GL account maintenance, and then that would give me the ability to either see the original budget compared to the activity or a budget revision. If it's an account that doesn't have a budget, maybe I would be looking at a prior year activity compared to the current year activity to see variance details. And if I did need a budget, the budget button will actually let me define that budget. Original budget, unlimited number of budget revisions, and some tools here to select budgets, change budgets, calculation wizards, clearing and resetting cells. There's a more advanced budgeting tool if that's something that's needed. Just to let you know. And then transactions, these are the transactions. I can always drill down the source journal if I need to. And then there's, different things that I can do. I can create when I create a journal entry, I can have an automatic reversing date, and it would automatically create the reversing date. But if something gets posted that needs reversed that didn't have an automatic reversal, I do have the ability to, this will create a reversing entry. So you see it says reversal is complete.
So
instead of having to, now it created it, it's not posted yet, it's not committed. But if I go to general journal entry, you'll see, and I use this lookup button here, it creates the reversal. So, and it, flags it as a reversal of the journal that I selected. And that was, it was just 7 lines, but it's 7 lines that I didn't have to enter.
Mm-hmm.
And then I can edit this if I need to. Questions?
You just hit accept, which means it posted?
No. So it's still there. So in Sage 100, I have to go through we're more gap compliant than like QuickBooks. So I'm going to print, and it'll ask me, do you want to post? So I'm going to preview. So this is my opportunity to make sure that's correct. So I can review this. Now, once I print it, it has, do you want to update? If I found a mistake, I can say no and go back and make a correction. If it was good and I want to post, I'll say yes. Now it's committed and posted. So if I go back now to general journal entry and use that flashlight lookup, that transaction is gone. It's posted.
So printing is actually posting?
Well, printing, I'll say the printing is the review process. Printing is the opportunity for you to verify that the information that you're looking at is correct. And you get that. It's not posted until you answer that question. Do you want to update? So that's where that printout, if there's a mistake, you can say no to the update, go back to data entry, make the correction, reprint, verify it's correct now, and say yes on the second pass through. Hopefully yes on the second pass through.
Okay.
And that's the model. That's the model for updating throughout. So sales order invoices, you print the invoices, you print the sales journal, verify the sales journal is correct, and say yes to update. So it's, all the subledgers have that same model where you print or preview the register, verify it's correct, and say yes to update. Once you say yes to update, it's committed and posted. Other questions?
No.
Okay. You want to jump into AP?
Sure, yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's go to AP. We'll go to vendor setup. Now, let me ask you this. I have, to kind of let you know, so you'll notice I have these 01, 02 in front of the vendor number. Mm-hmm. Those are, it's optional in Sage 100. It's divisions. So I can define divisions for customers or vendors. So that represents a type of vendor. So I can associate default GL accounts with each division. So, if there's different types of vendors, I can define a division by vendor type, associate default GL accounts with that vendor type and essentially the division. So it does give me kind of shortcuts for different types of vendors if they exist. If that's not important, you can just say no divisions, and then you just would have Airway and Anders instead of that 01 dash as part of the vendor number field.
Okay.
I'll pull up Container Corp. Now, in this case, the vendor number, I have the name. Now, I could always do the same thing. I could start to type the name into the container and in the vendor number field, and it would do the same thing. It'd be the name and then the number. So I can use the lookup. Now, the main tab of the vendor record: address, primary contact, terms code, reference, credit card vendor flag, hold payment flag, electronic payment. Do they use, or would they need to use, or would like to use ACH payments to pay vendors?
Yeah, we're actually going through that issue right now of being a payment issue. And we were looking at third-party payment options like Bill.com to make payments, because so the owner has a slight control issue, and she wants to be the only one. It's a husband and wife that own the business, and so the wife signs the checks, and so it's kind of her job to do. But it's really slowing the process because both owners are in California right now. Well, we have payments that need to go out the door so that we can get shipments in. And so
Okay.
we're sitting on checks to process out. And I was like, dude, we can't, we're not a mom and pop business anymore. We need to step it up. So we need kind of like approvals and, like we need to be able to put bills in and have it approved by her and paid by her to a point.
Okay. So I don't have this
Makes sense.
interface here. Brian, did you discuss automation?
AP automation?
Yes.
Yeah. Megan, I'm going to send you a link for that. Do you have any idea how many transactions per month they're doing on AP side?
I mean, I would say maybe 100, 150.
Okay.
Not
it's
that
a lot.
many. No.
So
Yeah.
there's an option, a service option called AP automation that can be integrated. The AP invoices can be booked into a web portal. So essentially, when those invoices have been posted to the web portal, it can send her a notification, you have invoices for review. She can then go into that web portal and review and approve them. Once she reviews and approves them, it can push it down to Sage 100 for payment.
Okay.
Now, does she also want to be a part of the payment generation, or is it just reviewing and approving the invoices for payment? Once that approval, if she's the only one that has access to that approval, and she says it's approved and it drops down to 100, does she have other control details she wants to assert, or just I'm approving that invoice for payment?
Maybe it might be that she wants to actually push the payment and we approve it.
Okay.
I don't know which one she has more control issues on.
Okay. So I'm just going to show you. So for example, if this electronic payment is saying instead of a paper check, I'm going to generate an ACH and upload that ACH file to the bank. Now, if it is a check on the vendor, what I would do here is in the drop-down box, I would say electronic payment. So this is where I would specify their bank account, the routing number, the bank account type. Now, even though it's flagged as electronic payment, you can see I don't have some critical details. So if I go to print to do an ACH now, it'll say this vendor is flagged as an electronic payment, but you haven't processed the pre-note yet, so a paper check would be generated. So even though I have that checkbox check, I haven't done all the work yet. I don't have the bank to send a pre-note to. So it's going to validate to make sure, okay, to do an ACH, you have had to send the pre-note and noted the pre-note approval. So that has to be, would have to have been processed to do the ACH payment. So because I haven't done all that extra work, even though it's flagged as electronic payment, it's still going to generate a paper check. Once I get that processed and have the pre-note details specified, then it will let me pay that vendor by ACH and would generate that ACH payment file that I could upload to the bank. Make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Are credit cards used to pay any vendors, any other invoices?
Credit cards used. No, currently not right now because the credit card's with the other company.
Okay. So if you ever need to, so you see this checkbox here, this credit card vendor, that would allow me to establish, for example, I could create Amex as a vendor and flag them as a credit card vendor. So if I use that Amex to pay an invoice from Container Corp that we look at here, it would allow me essentially, I wouldn't have to cut a check to Container Corp. It would allow me to transfer the balance. So I could say I'm paying Container Corp's invoice with an Amex, and what it would do is reduce the invoice balance here on Container Corp to 0 and transfer that balance to the Amex vendor. So there's a way to go with it. So I still have the purchase history. My purchase history is more importantly captured here for Container Corp. That's who I issued the purchase order to. That's who I bought the mask from or the equipment from, the materials from. So I have that, I've retained that actual purchase history, but when I use my Amex or Visa or MasterCard to pay that bill, there's a function where I can just transfer the balance from this vendor to the credit card vendor. And then, of course, I would eventually at some point pay Amex for that. So that's what that credit card checkbox does for me. Now, here's where, again, these just examples of custom fields. So, need additional attributes associated with vendor record, I can do that as well. Additional tab is just additional information. Now, this is a PO vendor, so what I'm going to do is check this checkbox. So I don't usually do, so in this case, I buy materials from them, so I'm issuing purchase orders for materials for this vendor. So I check this little checkbox. What that will do is if I go into accounts payable invoice data entry and I enter this vendor number into the vendor number field in AP invoice data entry, I'll get a little text box saying, please verify that if this invoice is associated with the purchase order, use purchase order receipt of invoice. So it's just, I can still enter an AP invoice if I need to, but it's just a reminder saying, hey, this is a PO vendor. So if there's a purchase order, make sure you use purchase order receipt of invoice entry. So I do the matching. So my purchase order, ordered, invoiced, and received quantities can be matched properly. If I do it in accounts payable, it doesn't match back to the PO. So it's just a little, reminder message. Now let's say that this was, in this case, I have a GL account associated with this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to change. I'm going to pick a different vendor, in this case, Airway, and I'm going to go to the same. Now notice here, this is not a PO vendor. This is my landlord. So when I do an AP invoice now, the default GL account is rent, which is perfect. Now, let's say I want to distribute rent across multiple GL accounts. I can actually right now, it's just 100% going to that rent account, but I could build a default expense, have that expense distributed across multiple accounts. So I could build a default distribution table if you ever need to do that. In this case, 100% is going to the rent account. That's what I want to do. If you need 1099s, you enable 1099 processing. It would enable this so you can specify the vendor type, the default form, and it would start to accumulate the 1099 history. So I don't know if I have any detail, but based on the box, it would start to accumulate that. And at the end of the year, we can definitely generate 1099s. There's even an option to do electronic filing through a company called Atrix.
Through who?
Atrix, AATRIX. We can give you some information on that too. It's generally based on the number of filings, the number of records you're filing for.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll send you some info on that.
Okay.
Statistics is going to be activity date, last purchase date, last check number, payment date, amount, your average days to pay, overdue, your balance, your aging for that vendor. Summary is going to show me my period to date, year to date, prior year, purchases, payments, discounts taken, lost. I can look at that for any period or year in history. History is going to show me my purchases, payments, discount taken. I can add prior year columns to compare the prior year. I can look for any years in history. Now, this is probably going to be the more frequently accessed tab, invoices. I can sort by any column, so invoice number, invoice date, due date, balance. Now, when I select one at the top, notice down here, when I select one at the top, what you'll see in the bottom is every transaction associated with the invoice I selected. The invoice when we created and posted it, and then in the case here that we created a payment and applied that payment to this invoice. So basically the check number is being referenced. And, so now I know why that's at a zero balance, because we created a payment and applied that payment. Now, this also has visibility into bank reconciliation. So if that check had been cleared by the bank, it could see that in bank reconciliation, and I don't have to go to bank rec to see that. It would pass that through and show it as cleared on this tab. Now, the zero balance invoices, this would apply to if you do an adjustment. I don't know if I have any with adjustments, but I would see, any transaction apply to that invoice, whether it was a payment, adjustment, et cetera. I'd see that. Now, like the zero balance invoice, you can define a retention period, how long you want to see a zero balance invoice after it's been paid. So maybe you want to see it, for, a month after it's been paid, maybe 2 months. So you can say 30 days, 60 days, et cetera. So what it does is during period in processing, it evaluates the zero balance invoices, sees how long it's been at a zero balance, and if it exceeds your retention period, we'll move it from here into history. So you don't have to see zero balance invoices indefinitely. But you can retain them as long. You may want to see them for a month after you pay them to make sure everything is right. So you can define that retention period. So once it's moved, the older ones that have been paid for longer, if I use this drop-down box, you see invoices inquiry, that's the history. So these are the ones that have been at zero balances for longer periods of time. So it moves them from this open file to what we call invoice history. Questions?
Okay. No.
Transaction is going to be every transaction. This is great. Let's say that there's a dispute with the vendor about how they applied a payment. Never happens, right? So sorting by the column. So I'm going to sort by the check number. So I know, let's say, for example, check number 1611 should have been applied to these specific invoices right here. So this gives me kind of that information sorted in a format that allows me to have a intelligent conversation with lots of ammunition on my side to talk to that vendor about how they misapplied the payment to the wrong invoices. Because I'm sorting by the check number, so I clearly know which ones it should have been applied to. Checks will be the checks issued, payments issued, and then here's kind of a critical detail. I'm going to cancel out of this vendor here because, again, this is my landlord. I wouldn't typically issue a PO to my landlord. I'm going to go to Container Corp and go to this PO tab. So these are all the open purchase orders. So these are the purchase orders that have been issued to this vendor. I can sort by type here, so drop ship, master order, standard order, sort by required date, etc. And if I need to, I can also drill into and see those specific purchase orders, required date. Now, probably have more detail with the add-on. You may have a container or a ship and, on the water date and when it was supposed to, so it'll probably add additional details specific to, container tracking on the water type details to these. So you would be able to track and see POs by that information as well. Now, even we have the required date. I'm just coming down here. Maybe it's a larger purchase order. Now, anytime you see a data entry screen, you see ordered, back ordered. You may want, if you want the description, each user can just drag and drop and put that where they want. Now, I showed you the required date at the header level. Maybe items are coming in at different times. Maybe it's a large PO that may be over 6 months. So maybe I'm going to get, a few in June, and maybe some are coming in August and a few coming in September. So I can have a required date on the header, but I can also specify the required date on a line-by-line basis if there's going to be differences on when those are expected to be received. Questions?
No.
Okay. So now, in addition to what we kind of showed you, additional functionality to the drop-down box here, I can create and maintain multiple contacts for my vendors. I have notes and email addresses. So again, I can email automatically POs, return orders, check remittance advice, maintain purchase address, remit to addresses. If this is an items, so let's say you are curious of what your purchase history from this vendor is, you're able to actually, from the vendor record, pull in an item and see, the quantity received, the cost of goods sold, quantity returned, compare that to last year. If you have a contracted price for a vendor, you can even maintain the pricing that you pay that vendor for items in Sage 100. You can define a price schedule that you pay a vendor for specific items that would automatically be applied to purchase orders.
Okay.
Questions?
No.
So that's, the vendor maintenance. I'll show you, again, purchase orders a separate module. I'm going to show you, again, let's say the rent or electric bill, just standard accounts payable, not a purchase order. So I'm going to pull in, we'll just stick with Airway here for the landlord. I'm just going to say, I think I paid July rent this morning on another demo. So I think I'm just going to say August rent here.
Well, that's actually a prepayment, so.
Yeah. I'm just going to say, so I should get a discount because I'm good.
Yeah, you should. You're a very good tenant. Either that or you're just afraid you're going to get kicked out.
I get the line item detail. If it's 1099, of course, this probably wouldn't be a 1099 detail, but I can specify that detail here. It pulls in from how that vendor is set up. So again, I don't have remember the default GL account. There it is. No need. If I need to, I can override that. If I'm paying a damage something, I will pay him for some damage that was incurred. In this case, I'm just paying rent because I am a good tenant.
Okay.
So
And
so
the
that
header
invoice
stuff
is-
would,
this is-
sorry, the header stuff would auto-populate too?
Yeah.
And
Yeah. So based on the
technically
terms code. Yeah.
the
yeah.
form would be rent if it's a rental, just FYI.
Correct.
Coming from an attorney.
Now, let's say this is something that I want. Now, the rent, I may not need this attachment because it's recurring, but let's say it's a service fee for some rewiring of the internet in an office, and I want to attach the invoice for that. This button here is called a memo button. It's specific to this invoice. I could actually scan and save that document, the invoice from that vendor. I can just say scan or whatever I want to call that, and then I can browse out to where I save that. Now, in this case, it's a pointer too. So what I would recommend if you want to use this functionality, create a shared folder that people could share documents to, so it's not on their desktop, so they forget it and actually delete it. They break the link. So that's why I would say do it to a shared folder, so it's unlikely that someone's going to try to clean up their desktop and accidentally break these links. So I'm just going to point to one of my paperless documents that I'll just say PO here. So I'm going to point to that one. I'm going to say accept. So now what you'll notice is it's highlighted in yellow to indicate a memo exists. So I can now go here and click this button and be able to see the scan of the original invoice from the vendor. Questions?
No.
And I can have more than one. Now at the top, you'll notice this little button here. That's a memo associated with the vendor. That's where my rental contract is attached. So I can refer to my rental contract. Now I can do that for customers too, and I can attach documents to customer invoices as well. So just going to keep that in mind. So, and again, in this case, I'm going to hit the printer icon. So this again, where that invoice is in data entry, it's not yet committed. So here's my opportunity. Now I'll point out too, now notice here, today's date is actually in a future period based on where my demo, I haven't closed my period yet. So my current period in Sage 100 is period 5. This date is a future period, which is not a problem. It is actually, if you actually, based on what I was booking, it should probably be an August date because that was August rent. I can post to the current period and any future, and it will allocate that based on how the fiscal periods are defined. So I can post to the current or any future period, no problem. I want to show you here, if I change this to, let's say I change it to 4, doesn't like that. That period's closed. I can't post to a closed period. Current, futures, no problem. So let's just go ahead and make that in August. I'm going to preview. So again, this is the opportunity to review that to make sure that that's correct. I get some different registers based on how my setup, I have divisions turned on. Now again, if I found a mistake, I could say no, I could go back and make a correction. If that was good and I want to update, I'll say yes. So those invoices, so that receivable is now posted on that account, and you're just seeing the GL side of that being posted and the transaction being saved to the paperless archive.
Awesome.
Questions? Now, when it comes to paying a bill, I can do I could go in and pick a specific vendor and invoice to pay. I'm going to show you this. This kind of gives you the ability to say, show me all the invoices that are due based on invoice due date or discount date or both. Or, I can say, you know what? I'm going to just go ahead and take all my discounts, regardless of the date. Do I want to pay just paper checks? Do I want to pay just electronic vendors or both? And what's nice here, based on the data I have here, I can click this button, and it's going to show me all the invoices that are due based on the date that I specified on the previous screen. From here, if you got a big bank account, you can go ahead and select all the invoices for pay, or maybe here you're saying, I want this one, this one, this one, this one, and this one. So I can review those and pick the ones I actually want to move into the payment. So I'll say OK, and then I'm going to hit the printer icon, and it will initiate a review. The totals by, I've been doing this all day long too, so you can kind of see the vendor, the check entry number, any comments, and then here's where I was saying, it's flagged as an ACH vendor, but I haven't got all the pre-note stuff done yet, so it's defaulting back to a paper check. So it's going to validate that you've done the pre-notes for any electronic payment vendor. Now from here, after reviewing this, it will go into, you want to print checks? I'll go ahead and say yes. I'm not going to be able to complete this process because it's not going to recognize a previewed check as a printed check. What I want to point out here is, let me ask you this, on printed checks, are you filling in the blank on pre-printed check stock, or are you printing everything from scratch?
Pre-printed check stock is what we have for QuickBooks right now.
So
but
we
would
I
be
can
able
use the
to
designer.
convert that to whatever software we buy.
So we can either, if you have pre-printed, so we can set this up so we're, designer allows me to either just print everything on completely blank check stock, including nicker encoding if you need to.
Okay.
Or I can basically design it to fill in the blanks, the payee, the date, the amount on that check stock that you have. So I just say, put, where to print that on the check stock. This is an example of, where I have blank check stock. I'm printing every little bit of ink is going to be printed by me in this case. Now I'm going to preview. I'm not going to be able to complete the update process because I haven't physically, in the print for checks, I need to physically print to be able to update. So here's my check remittance advice at the top. You can see here again. Now, Micker encoding is just the font, so you can buy the fonts and have the Micker encoding print if that's needed. Now, what I'll say is, I don't know if you discovered, I have a lot of customers that have discovered that the bank is still going to try to sell you magnetic ink, but they use optical scanning now. So magnetic ink may not be a purchase you need to make. Questions on that?
No.
Okay. Where would you like to go from here? I just want to be, we're at 3 o'clock. I don't know if that's the time. Have you seen enough? Have you seen too much? You haven't seen enough?
I've seen a lot.
Hence the recording.
Yeah. I'm good. Do you think I mean, we're going to be using outside payroll probably for the most part. So the payroll module is probably not good. I guess the inventory we touched
probably
on.
the more
Aggressive.
So again, let me kind of drill into here to just kind of show you. We touched on it on a high level basis. Let me just kind of show you how the item records are set up. I mean, I pulled in some things here. So item code here can be up to 30 characters long. I have my description. The description, notice that this is highlighted in yellow. That indicates that that's not all of the description. I have gibberish here. That I'm just showing here that I can have a very, very, very long description if it's needed. So all you have to do is just keep typing. It will automatically open up and capture what we call the extended item description. And then you determine how much of that description needs to be printed on sales orders, purchase orders, and invoices.
Okay.
Sage 100, every item in Sage 100 needs to be associated. You have to have at least one product line for inventory items in Sage 100. So if I come here to product line, it's a way to group items. So for example, I'll say mask. So you can have mask as a product line. Every variation of mask could be associated with that product line. Then you could have bandages, other types of product families. Now, what product line will do is it allows you to group items under a family or group or product line, if you will. And then it also is a shortcut. So when I create a new item, what I can do is here, I set up the product line and I say items of this product line are usually finished goods. They're usually FIFO valuations. They're usually by units of measure. So all these fields, when I create a new item, I would enter the item, the description. When I pick the product line, these values are automatically pulled from the product line and applied to the new item. So it does act as a shortcut in that I don't have to pick and assign these values to the new item. It's inherited from the product line that I pick for the item. Questions?
No,
Now,
that's perfect.
on that individual item, let's say instead of FIFO, that is one of those items that needs lot tracking, I can then override the default and say this item is going to be lot instead of FIFO. So I can override the defaults. So it's kind of a validation in that you can say items of this product line are typically this, but you can manage and apply exceptions to specific fields. If that item is FIFO or LIFO or lot, you can override it for that particular item. Another thing it will do, I'm going to come up here to accounts. The inventory itself doesn't have a GL account assigned to it. The item's GL account postings would be determined by which product line it's been associated with. So you can kind of see here. So what inventory account to debit or credit is based on the product line it's been associated with. Questions?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now,
can you hold on for a second before you exit that? Go back to the main tab. That sales tax class right there. How's the sales tax functionality within Sage? Will we still need
this is just
third party?
Class is just taxable or non here,
Okay.
and let's say, let me show you here what would come into what taxes are due or would be based on, now let me kind of show you, I'll go into a customer, I'll pull up ABF. So the critical thing would be the customer. Now I have what we call a, let's see where we at here, tax schedule. Now the schedule, you have, I can enter what we call tax codes. So tax code is associated with an individual tax jurisdiction. So let's say Milwaukee. Now Milwaukee has, there may be the city, the county, the state, so there's multiple taxing jurisdictions that may apply to this customer. What the tax schedule is the combination of all the applicable tax schedules that this customer would pay. State, city, county. Now each of these codes would have an individual rate. So what it would do is say, 3% for the county, 4% for the city, et cetera. And the schedule would be, 7.5% or whatever, the total of all the individual tax rates based on all the jurisdictions. So the schedule assigned to the customer is the combination of all the applicable tax codes that would need to be paid. Now, this is the parent, but, I think I'm going to point out to you here, if I go into the ship to, so if I ship to multiple locations for this customer, each specific, oops, that's not the one I want here, I want location code. The ship to here, so each ship to address can have a tax schedule assigned. So if it's clearly different because it's, and it may be, the upper Midwest, maybe they're over the line in Illinois. So maybe they have an address in Illinois. So of course that would have a different tax schedule. So I can have the master tax schedule on the customer record, but then I can have the same one at the ship to or different ones based on that. Now, that would have to be, if there's taxing changes, so the rate changes, you have to know to go manually change that. So if you go with, I'm going to maintain it, you got to stay on top of it. If you know the tax rate's going to change, you have to go into the code and update the rate. Now, if you want that more automated, we do and can integrate with Avalara. So instead of having this specific one, I could say Avatax, and that would tell the system, go connect to Avalara to determine which taxing jurisdictions and calculate the tax for me.
And Megan, that's who you guys were looking at, right? Avalara?
Yes, sir. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So I would still put a tax schedule, but the tax schedule is going to tell the system, don't use internal, go use, go connect to Avalara to determine the taxing jurisdiction for that specific ship to address.
And then, John, could you touch a little bit on the multiple warehouses?
Okay, yeah, so let me get back to that record here. So you can see I'm not limited to one. In this case, I have East, Central, East, and West, even some virtual ones. So if I have like scrap or returns or maybe a QA hold, I can create, it doesn't have to be a physical actual warehouse. I can, it's 3-digit code, so I could create, like you say, a scrap warehouse, a QC warehouse, a returns or scrap, warehouse. So I can, if I, get a return from someone, I don't, want to make sure it's still in its original packaging, or I can't sell it. So I could, have a kind of a quarantine warehouse for returns to check that. If it comes in and it's opened, can't use it. I got to put it in scrap warehouse, or maybe going to sell it for another purpose other than its originally intended purpose. But again, you can see here. So defining the warehouse is pretty simple. Again, let me get to, I would just go into inventory maintenance, and then under setup, and this is where any warehouse that you need to define, you would set up the code and the description and the location. Now, what's nice is if a warehouse needs, let's say you're going to do a physical count, you could say this warehouse is going on restricted status, prohibit specific types of data entry during this time frame while it's in restricted, so we can do our physical count, or other activities if you need to. So you can put a warehouse in a restricted status if you need to. Now another thing you'll notice here, this post to location, this is a GL segment value. So I've assigned a GL segment value to the warehouse. So when I run inventory reports in GL, I have the inventory value, as a whole, but I can break that out by warehouse location as well.
Okay.
Good deal.
Questions?
No.
And you can see if I go through, again, very similar, not exactly, but it's that tabbed interface that you've noticed probably for AP and AR. Additional information associated with the item record. Do you allow returns as a restocking charge? Commission methods? Do I need labels? Do I need to associate an image with this record? Do you allow trade discounts? Quantity is going to be the same thing as the bottom. Now notice for each warehouse, I track quantity on hand, what's on PO, what's on sales order, committed, available. Now in this case, available is the on hand minus what's on sales order. So a salesperson coming in to place an order against for this item against warehouse 000 will not see 3,066 available. The quantity that they'll be presented available for sale will be 1,173, accounting for what's already ahead of them on the order process. Now, if you wanted to, I could change my options and say, include in the quantity available the PO quantity. I'm not doing that now. So this available is not adding the PO. I could do that. Now, based on containers coming from overseas and taking a long time, you probably wouldn't want to do that. You wouldn't want to tell the sales rep it's available now when it's on the water. But for whatever reason, if you needed to, you could change that to say, hey, include an available. Now, let me kind of show you. If I go to sales order, I want to show you, if I go to do a sales order, when I am creating that order for a customer, now I'm going to change this. I can do quotes. I'm going to change this to a standard order. I just want to show you the sales reps will have visibility as they're entering the order. I think one of the screens popped up. So. Let's say I'm pulling in the item we were just looking at. Now notice it's telling me for this particular item in the warehouse, this warehouse 001 versus 000 has a negative availability. Let me just change this to 000. And I can set the default warehouse. That's why. So see what restricted warehouses do first. Let me go back to 001. So in the order field down here, it's giving me just summary, the available quantity. It doesn't mean I'm negative on hand. It just means there's probably more on order. That's what's on hand. So let's say I'm not paying attention and I go ahead and enter 100. Immediately presented with the entry quantity exceeds what's available. I can just accept that because maybe I know someone's going to issue a PO. So at some point we're going to get that. But maybe I want to balance what's available. Maybe I want to see if there's another item in stock. So this is something I can do at the item level. I can say that if this item is out of stock, you can substitute with this item as the first priority. or this is the second best item, or this, so I can define substitutes and prioritize if that's something that can be done. Now, what I'm going to do now is I can also see maybe it's in another warehouse. So I have visibility to see if it's in another warehouse. So I'll say 002 because there's plenty there. So it let me do that. So now I'm pulling from a warehouse that does have availability. Now, if I need a bigger picture than what I'm seeing there, this button will give me a summarized view of the warehouses on hand, on PO, on sales order. And if I have the rights to, if I have security permissions, if I right-click here, I could actually even go to the full item inquiry, and maybe I just want to see when a purchase order is due. So I know it's on PO. Maybe I want to come here and validate when, the next shipment is due to arrive in that particular warehouse. So I can, again, I have that, that little summary screen. I can get a little more detail, or I can drill into the full item inquiry to see more detail if I need to. Question?
No, that's perfect.
Okay. Now, let me ask you this. Do you have customers that have their own part numbers? They're always giving you their part number instead of yours?
Right now, no, but I would assume that's going to happen.
So there is, if I go back to the item record, in this little drop-down box, we have what we call aliases. So if a customer has a part number, or even the vendor, so, the vendor is definitely going to have their part number. So let's start with that. So let's say vendor, this is the vendor part number for our part number. I can change this from general to vendor and specify which vendor's part number that is. And now, so when I print the purchase order, I can have it print the vendor number on it. So you'd have your number print, but you can show them you can print the vendor part number as well. So basically it's a we call it alias, but it's basically a way to cross-reference your part number to the vendor's part number or the customer's part number. So I think I already have one here. So this is an example where this is my customer's part number, and this is the customer that uses that part number. Now, in this case, the vendor one is only enabled for a purchase order for that specific vendor. This is enabled in sales order or sales order invoice data entry for this, when the order or invoice is for this specific customer. But let's say that there's a manufacturing part number that the vendor or the customer may refer to. I can say MFG, keep it general, and this allows me to define an alternate or a cross-referenced item without having to specify a specific customer or vendor. So this can be used for any customer or any vendor in PO or sales order data entries.
Awesome.
Okay. Let's see here. So quantity, again, same thing. Again, same thing you see at the bottom of the main spread. It's just, just the quantity information on this tab. History is going to show me my quantity sold, received, issued. If you just want to look at sales, you can choose this radio button to see sales numbers or receiving numbers. A nice thing here is, are we selling more or less of this item this year? Turn on prior year columns. Now I'm comparing sales this year to the prior year. I can even drill down to a specific customer. Now I can do the same thing from the customer record. I can pull in items and see their, but here gives me, I can pick any customer, quantity sold, dollar sold, even the year-over-year comparisons. I can pull in a vendor to see, purchases from that specific vendor. Now transactions, this is the audit trail. If a transaction affects the quantity of an item, it will create a line item here. Inventory receipts, transfers, where this was the source warehouse. We transferred, in this case, 41 out of this warehouse to another warehouse. Physical count, in this case, we did a physical count. The count that we entered was 2 less than what the system said we should have. So when we updated the physical count register, it resulted in the system creating a transaction so that the system matched the count. If I counted more, it would be a positive value. We counted 2 less. Adjustments, receipts, transfers, PO. So this is the actual purchase order receipt. That's the receipt number. Anything like this, double click will open up receipt history inquiry. What vendor, what purchase order, what other lines were received with it. So I can drill down to the receipt history inquiry. If it was an item sold to a customer, SO, sales order invoice number, and I can drill into invoice history inquiry, what customer, what sales order, what other line items were sold. So lots of detail. Orders, I can look at open purchase orders, open sales orders, and then drill into either one. Now, let me kind of show you again. This is a FIFO item. In this warehouse, I have 3,066. Those now notice I have a standard cost. So even though it's FIFO, I can still specify and maintain a standard cost. The system's going to calculate an average. And I'll point out this average is an average across all the warehouses. So this is the item average. If I drill into the warehouse, each warehouse will have its own average cost. So you can see it's different from the item average because I have so many warehouses. So there's different running averages by item and warehouse. Now, the key thing here is being FIFO, last cost is available here. And what I can do is this 3,066 may have come in at different times at different costs. If I go to this cost detail tab, now I see the receipt date, the receipt number, the cost, and the unit cost. So this is, I have 289 at 2642, 100 at 2950, 2500 at 34. So this gives me visibility to what is in inventory, when it was received, and what cost it's at. So my total inventory cost is broken out here by costing tier, by when it was received, what's left in inventory, and the cost. The zero quantity tiers are purged during period end processing. Questions?
No.
This tab is only enabled for LIFO, FIFO, lot, and serial. So if I was on a lot tracked item, this would also include the lot number, and then of course any other attribute that expiration date or country of origin can be added. Any of those other things that we talked about earlier could be added to that. Another thing that may come into play, particularly notice again, last cost allocated. I can, when I do a receipt of goods, when I receive goods into inventory, purchase order has landed cost functionality, so I can say that I'm paying the vendor, $29.50, but I also have to pay a freight forwarder, and I have to pay the government duties. So I can, when I receive it into inventory, I can apply freight and allocate the freight to the cost of the item. I can allocate any duties or taxes to that item. So in that case, I would have my last item cost be the unit cost on the PO.
One second.
Sorry. Go ahead.
All right. And then I can have the allocated cost. So what it would do is you can define how you want to, by cost, by volume, by weight, by quantity. So if there's $100 of freight, if I say by quantity of 100 items, it would allocate $1 per item, right? Or, so it depends on the allocation method. So you can add additional costs at the time of receipt, freight, duty, etc. So when you receive it, it more accurately reflects the cost to get that item here. Questions?
No.
Okay. Again, let's see here. You have the ability, again, there's reorder information, so I can establish kind of reorder methods, economic order quantities, reorder points, minimum order quantities. Now, there's an optional module that's available that can monitor the database. So I can run a reorder point, and it would say, hey, you need to order this. There is an optional module. Instead of having to go and run that report, let me just come in here real quick. I believe it has some emails that will kind of demonstrate. Instead of having to know to go look for that, I could just have an email every day showing me, for example, in this case, these are all, I got an email. I can get an email every day showing me the items that are at or below the reorder point.
Okay.
Here's an example, different alert telling me all of my vendors that have a balance of more than 1,000 as of a certain date. So it's not there automatically, but it's something that can be added to the system. So the great thing about this is those alerts, you define which alerts you need to know about. So let me go to Navigator here real quick. So in this case, I just have 2 alerts running in my system. So I only have 2 scheduled. I have that vendor listing and the item listing. But these are all the kind of standard, I can have AP alerts, customer alerts. So if there's an alert that what's due today, if I want to get an email showing me the AP invoices that are due today, so you can have this sent to your to the owner, so she could be getting these invoices. I could activate this alert, and what's nice is I can create her as a subscriber, or whoever needs this email. You define the subscriber, so it's not like you have to set these up and everybody just gets bombarded with it. For each type of alert, you set up and say who needs to get this email. So it could be a daily thing, a list of items that meet that, or when an event occurs in the system. So maybe she wants to know every time there's a check cut for over $2,000. A check is entered or an AP invoice is entered with a certain balance. She could automatically get an email saying an invoice has been entered in the system that exceeds the, $2,000 amount.
Hi, who do we have there?
My daughter, Corey.
Hi, Corey.
She just came home from grandma's house.
Okay.
So we
So
went a little.
And what John just showed you there is workflow and alerts. It's an extended solution. It can be a game changer because you can actually set up an alert for pretty much anything. I call it the module that you'll never have to say, man, I wish I'd have known that.
Right.
It can alert you on anything pretty much.
Is that easy to set up though? It looks kind of.
Yeah. It would be part of your implementation.
Okay.
I do have a video on it, a recorded demo. I'll send it to you. And then just
all the alerts you see here they call them event packs. So all these alerts are common things that most people need. So this is just when it's installed, you install the alert pack, and then you can tweak. I can come in and I can tweak the alert with different criteria. But most of the common things that most people need to know about, the alert already exists. But you can modify those existing alerts or create custom ones from scratch. Now, there's a new version that has a more user-friendly interface. I just haven't completed my install of that one yet.
Okay. Perfect.
But this is nice because it monitors the database. So it's it can be that list of send me a list every day of these certain things, but it can also be when that condition when that happens in the database. So something that could be a problem, and you say, let me know when this condition exists. When whatever occurs and creates that condition in the database, you get an email immediately. You don't have to wait for someone to find that or for it to present itself in a negative way. You know immediately when that condition exists in the database because it sends you an email or a text message.
Right. And is it possible to have like those kind of things on like a dashboard? So like when the main owner or the main, user that comes in is seeing these things on the main dashboard of their screen, or are they always going to have to go into their modules to see this?
Well, it depends. So it's alert. So there's the alert portion and the workflow portion. So the workflow portion could have, maybe it's not go in and see it. Maybe it's initiate a report. So maybe it would send them a report for that detail. So the workflow portion kind of says, not just not just the notification, but what needs to happen now. And maybe that happening now could be the workflow. Instead of having them have to log in the system and go look at something specifically, the workflow could generate a report to email them. So they have that,
And I sent you the video on that, Megan.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right, are we good? Anything else?
I think we are good.
Okay. I sent you a few things. I'm also going to send you some of the CAN reports that come with 100, so you can take a look at those.
Okay.
Those will be the crystal reports. And then on the AP automation piece, I sent you that video too.
Yeah, I saw that too. Thank you.
Yeah, if you want to dive further into that, let me know. There's a few questions that I'll need to ask you because I'll fill out like a form for them, and then one of their people will give you a call to confirm what's in the form, and then they can do a live session on that piece for you. And it's a short session. It's not as long as this. It's about 30 minutes.
Okay. No, this has been very, very helpful, and it does seem very user friendly. The setup seems slightly intense, but I think every implementation is going to be intense in that sense. I do like that we can import our current use of our data and our accounting. So that's very helpful. But this has been great.
And I'll download this to a YouTube channel for you guys. Once that's complete, I'll send you the link for that.
Okay.
All right. If there's anything
If it wasn't too overwhelming.
No.
I'm going to test you to see if you remember it all, right?
I think I might be able to navigate majority of it. Like I might stumble and then say, please don't quote me on that piece, but I think I might be able to navigate it.
Cool. Well, good.
Yeah.
All right. If there's anything that I missed that you think of, let me know. The next thing we have coming up is the demo with Seth for the On the Water piece on Tuesday.
Okay.
So this will give you a little bit of time to digest what you saw today.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that would be perfect.
Yeah, from there, after that demo, it's just setting up a scoping call so we can spec out, what it's going to cost to implement it all on the 100 side.
Right.
And then on Seth's call, he'll be able to, scope it and figure out what it's going to cost to implement that as well.
Okay.
All right. Well, listen, thank you for joining the call. John, thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you, John. That was perfect.
You're very welcome.
We'll be back in touch on Tuesday.
All right. Thank you, guys. Have a great weekend.
Bye.
Too. Bye-bye.
Bye.